Bonjour, bienvenue to our first of what will hopefully be several opportunities to increase our abilities in French. But this time we're going to start with something pretty simple, just learning how to count. We're going to start with les chiffres 0 to 30. So let's begin. Zero. Always got to start at the bottom. Zero. You'll notice over the E there's an accent mark. That is called an accent aigu. But in this class, we're going to call it the accent café. So anytime you see it on top of an E like this, the sound comes out as an E. It's like you're smiling and you're pronouncing the letter A. E. So when we see this, it's zéro. Zéro. The French R is kind of tricky. There's a couple of different ways I know how to do it. You can try the traditional French R, which is you roll it from the back of your throat. Or a trick that I learned a couple years ago, which is actually pretty good. Instead of making an R sound, make a very breathy H sound, like a H. So zero. And that can make the sound just as well. Zero. Simple enough. However, anytime we see a vowel, A, E, I, O, or U, in front of an N or an M, and there's no other vowel behind it, this sound needs to come out of our nose. It's a nasal sound. So rather than saying un, like we usually do in English, you need to push it up through the back of your mouth, out of your nose. Think like if you're trying to speak like Steve Urkel from Family Matters or Fran Drescher from The Nanny, you're trying to push it out of your nose. Hon, hon, hon. Try it. It's okay if you mess up, but the point is to keep trying. On. De. For two. De. EU in French is a vowel sound that we do not have in English. So this is a new sound you're going to have to learn to pronounce. The easiest way to explain it is take your bottom jaw and push it out so your bottom teeth are in front of your top teeth. And then pronounce an sound. De. If you're doing it correctly, you should hear a sound that sounds really familiar, but isn't exactly the same as sounds you've heard before. De. Also, you'll notice I'm not pronouncing the X. In the French language, the last letter, save for a few different sounds, is always silent. So, de. Notice you don't hear the X at all. There are going to be some times when that's going to change, but for the most part, that's an easy rule to follow. Don't pronounce the last letter. De. Trois. Trois. For three. Think of triangle means three angles. TR comes from the Latin root or the Greek root for three. Trois. You're also hearing the OI sound in French, which is a very common sound. When you see O and I together, it makes a wa sound. So you're actually pronouncing TRWA, trois, when you pronounce this one. And again, just like I said before, the S, since it's the last letter in the word, is silent. So trois. Quatre for four. Quatre. QU is just a K sound. So there's no wa involved with this one. But it's just anytime we see a Q or a QU, just pronounce a K. So it sounds like you're saying cat. Meow meow, cat. And those last sounds, so we're not pronouncing the E since it's the last letter. We are trying to make that R, but it's coming out very soft. Cat. In fact, when I say this in a sentence, you're not going to hear the R at all. So if I wanted to say, I have four brothers, j'ai quatre frères, you don't even hear the R sound at all. But when we say the number by itself, you probably will hear the R very softly. Quatre. The way I like to think is like, think like a cat, and then purr at the end of it. Quatre. Cinq. Cinq. C is pronounced like an S when there's an I behind it. And then notice there's another vowel with an N with no vowel behind it. So that IN in the middle is going to be nasal, coming out of my nose again. And that Q is going to be one of the few times we are going to pronounce at the end of the word. So you do hear that K sound. Cinq for five. One of the ways I like to remember this is that if you think of the Titanic, the big boat, The Titanic sank in 5 hours. Helps remember it. Cease. Cease. Shouldn't even have to really talk about this one except for the fact that the I comes out as an E sound. Cease. And that X is going to be pronounced like an S. This has to do with the Latin pronunciation, not necessarily the French. There are going to be a few times when we're going to do that. Cease. Set. Set. Do you notice what letter you're not hearing? That's right, you're not hearing the P, but you are hearing the T, again, of the Latin influence on the pronunciation. Set. Wheat. Wheat. H is always silent in French, so we're not hearing the H at all. What we are hearing is the we. UI makes a we sound in French and pronounce the T because of the Latin again. Wheat. Wheat. Almost like you're saying the grain. Neuf. Neuf. Just like in our word for two, de, we have that EU, that new vowel sound. And F is one of the few letters that no matter what always gets pronounced. Neuf. Neuf. And then we have dix. Rhymes with our word for six. So we have dix, and then we have six for six. So, when we review so far, we had 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those are the first numbers 0 to 10. We're going to need those every time we want to go anything higher than 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. So making sure we know the numbers 0 to 10 is going to be excruciatingly important. The next set of numbers are also going to be important, especially once we get to 60, because not only are we going to need them now, we're going to be using them again later. So let's continue. 11. 11. There's a vowel followed by an N with no other vowel, so that's going to be a nasal sound. 11. Make sure you get the Z, because that's how we know it's more than 10. 11. 12. 12. OU just is an OO sound in French. 12. 13. 13. Remember, if you can't roll that French R, just make it a breathy H sound. 13. EI in French, we drop our jaw. So drop your jaw and pronounce an A. 13. And that is 13. Notice there's still that ZE to help us remember it's over 10. Look familiar? It should. 14. QU makes an A sound. Cat. And then we just add in that ORZE, which are easy to pronounce. 14. Because what does a cat use when it goes boating? Cat oars. 14. Cans. Like you're trying to say 15 cans of soup on the wall. QU is just going to be that K sound like it has been before. IN, there's your nasal. You got an I followed by an N with no other vowel. So, and then the ZE sound we've been saying a couple of times already. Cans. Says. Says. Just like 13, but instead of a TR, it's just with an S. Says. I always remember this one from the phrase, Simon says 16. If you remember that little phrase, you'll always remember 16. Says. Oh no, what happened? Once we get to 17, we no longer have words that we can use. So we have to use words we've already learned. So you notice this one is D-set. Because what does it do? It adds 10, D, plus 7, set. Don't forget the hyphen. So then we're left with D-set for 17. 18. Just like we said for D-set, now we're doing 18. You'll notice there in the middle, you're hearing a little bit of a Z sound. That's because of the X. Since the H is silent, we're making a connection, it's called une liaison, with that X by making a Z sound, so 18. So I'm still using D for 10, I'm still using wheat for 8, I'm just connecting the two a little better to make it sound clear. 18. 19 for 19. D for 10, 9 for 9, 19. And that leads us to 20. Notice you don't hear the G, you don't hear the T, and we have that nasal IN, so you're hearing 20. And from here, we're just going to start following simple patterns. If we know 0 to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then the rest should be pretty simple. However, we are going to start with 21, 20, and, ET means and in French, 21. So 20 and 1 for 21. But that's only going to happen on the 1. So when we get to 21, 31, 41, 51, we're going to say et on. But everything else is going to follow a much simpler pattern, 22. So we're just combining two numbers that we already know. 20 for 20, 2 for 2. Still using that EU new vowel sound that we learned earlier, 22. But notice, instead of saying et on, we're just putting a hyphen in its place, 22. And we're going to continue that pattern with every number from here to 30. So for instance, 23 for 23, 23, 24 for 24, 24. Can you guess the next one without me? Did you say 25? 25 for 25, 26 for 26, 26, 20 and 7, or 27 for 27, 27, 28 for 28, 28, 29 for 29, 29. And that's going to bring us to the last number we're going to learn in this section, 30. Again, TR with the French R, tr, or t. EN, which is a nasal sound since we don't have a vowel behind it. And the T is the last thing we hear with a silent E, 30. So those are all of our numbers from 0 to 30. So let's start all the way at the bottom again, and let's see if we can pronounce them all. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. So hopefully that helped you a little bit learn your first set of numbers, 0 to 30. We are going to have a couple of assignments that are going to go along with this, so please refer back to this lecture as many times as you need. A bientôt!